So the panel will be in English, but Otsuka-san will speak in Japanese, so I will be switching languages. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here, and welcome to the FDSF Conference. I'm Teresa Caneta, partner at Brunz Group here in Tokyo, and I will be the moderator for this panel. So I have here with me Matthew. Where's Matthew in the Zoom?
I have access to my audio and I need help with the video.
All right, now he's here. So Matthew is in Washington, and he will be connecting. He's connected by Zoom. And then I have Ayumi Otsuka, Chief Sustainability Officer at Toyota, and Robert Feldman, Senior Advisor at Morgan Stanley Japan. So thank you to all panelists. I'm very excited and want to thank you for being here. The goal of this panel is to draw on inbound, outbound, and combined perspectives of sustainability. So how Japan, the world impacts Japan, how Japan impacts the world, and foster a kind of broader, deeper discussion about sustainability, not just about climate, which is, of course, a pressing issue, but talking more broadly about sustainable growth, sustainable business, sustainable society. So without further ado, I will ask each panelist to provide their views on the issue so we can move the discussion. I will start with Matt. I think it's easier. So hi, Matthew. Good evening for you. And thanks for joining discussion today. I'll ask you to please first introduce yourself quickly and then provide your thoughts on the Japanese approach to sustainability for an external point of view, and then talk a bit about the key trends that global trends that Japan should be aware of.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and begin. I'll tell you at the same time that it looks like the host needs to enable my video. So I'll begin on audio, and as soon as that happens, I'll go on video as well. But without further ado, let me say good morning. Thank you. My name is Matt Leatherman, and I am a Managing Director and Research Strategist at FCLT Global. FCLT stands for Focusing Capital on the Long Term, and that is our mission, to focus capital on the long term to support a sustainable and prosperous economy. We are a nonprofit research organization. Our members are leading companies and investors worldwide, and our job every day is to develop actionable tools and research to drive long-term value creation. Before I begin with the remarks just described, I want to take a moment and say thank you. First to Brunswick Group, and Canada-san, to you in particular. Brunswick Group is a member of FCLT Global, has given us this opportunity today to be part of the session, and enthusiastically and is insightfully committed to our work since day one of our relationship. We really appreciate that. Thanks also to our host, Future Design Initiative through Science and Finance, and to the opportunity to be with my fellow panelists today as well. Otsuka-san, Feldman-san, it's an honor to be with you, even if virtually. My job is to open today's conversation with a global perspective on sustainability to provide some context. So I'm going to begin broadly and narrow from there. First with international perspective on sustainability from the investment community, then a few themes that may apply in Japan, and lastly, maybe one or two thoughts of my own from outside on Japanese institutions' approach to sustainability. First, the international perspective. FCLT Global's research indicates that the best investors and companies around the world take one of two approaches to sustainability, acting either as analysts or as catalysts. Analysts think critically about the future and look for leading indicators of change. Catalysts know what it will take for them to succeed in the future and work to create those conditions. Both of them, analysts and catalysts together, differ from institutions that are silent on sustainability because they don't assume that the future is going to look like the past. They understand the future will look different from the past. Analysts and catalysts also have advanced beyond an earlier stage of sustainability thinking in which institutions made decisions merely by acting on their principles. This was good, it was a step forward, but it effectively assumed that the future is the present, and it lacks some means for how we get from the present to the future. I'll offer a few more words by way of definition before turning to themes. We see the key behavior of institutions acting as catalysts to be the way that they exercise influence. For example, an institution acting as a catalyst may use active ownership practices to engage with portfolio companies to help them innovate in ways that are needed for the future. They're working together. The implication is they can thrive together in the future, but they may also have to navigate some uncertainty and maybe even some difficulty in getting there because of how creative they're being. Analysts, on the other hand, have the key behavior of how they project, their projections. An investment institution acting analytically on sustainability may reweight its portfolio so that a company's securities are more or less prominent based on that investor's view of the company's sustainability over time. To give a couple of examples from global context, the way that CDPQ, the pension fund in Quebec, talks about constructive capitalism, or the way the New Zealand Superannuation Fund talks about an emphasis on quality, are both examples of the catalytic approach to sustainability from elsewhere in the world. I'll turn now to a couple of themes that we think are common between both of these types of sustainable institutions and what that might mean. I have 5. Sustainability is about time, uncertainty, adaptation, mission, and people. First, and perhaps most evidently, sustainability is about time. The best investors and companies worldwide evaluate sustainability in terms of how well they can expect to perform over multiple time horizons. They're thinking about the future. There's also some uncertainty in that. Sustainability is also about that. It's about uncertainty. The long term is different from just a series of short terms. To put that in investment context, we can all appreciate that there's a difference between buying a 10-year government bond and buying a 1-year government bond of 10 years in a row. You're going to get a very different investment. Climate has become synonymous for some with sustainability because it illustrates this uncertainty so well. Prior years are less and less predictive of each year's climate because the patterns are changing. They're not constant. It's just one of these trends, however, just one of these uncertainties, and the range covers other patterns like aging, urbanization, geopolitical relations, to more usual investor considerations like interest rates and inflation, and many other trends. The best investors and companies worldwide, we found, evaluate how they are likely to perform in a variety of probable scenarios, and they adjust to improve based on that review. In other words, sustainability is also about adaptation. It's not about continuing to do the same thing forever. We feel that the world around us is changing acutely, and institutions that do not adjust eventually will go away sooner or later. There is some paradox here. In order to sustain the mission of our institutions, we have to change how they do their work. I use the word mission. Sustainability is also about mission. At its very root, it's about doing something special that's worth sustaining, something that addresses an important need of society in a differentiated way. This is what we call performance. Such goods and services are worth sustaining, whether you're a company that sells them or an investor that finances them. Total shareholder return, internal rate of return, return on invested capital, and other figures are metrics of performance when they're used well. But they are not what sustainability is about. This is an overlooked but essential element of capitalism. The best institutions as investors redeploy capital away from efforts that are not productive for society, rather than trying to engineer ways of just preserving metrics. Lastly, in the theme, sustainability is about people. People make up society. People, our choices and our behaviors are what make the future uncertain and require us to adapt. In more usual business and investment language, we're talking about stakeholders, communities, customers, suppliers, employees, companies, investors, sponsors, government, and savers. All of the institutions in the room today have multiple stakeholders and adapt based on the varied responsibilities that you have to them and how you fulfill them. I'll conclude with just a few reflections, again from the outside, that may be relevant in Japan. First, we all know that business and investment culture varies around the world, including with respect to sustainability. We all have our strengths. We all have things that we can learn from one another, and none of us do this perfectly. This means at least two things. One, it means you can ignore those who would tell you that they know how to do this and that you don't. The world has a lot to learn from Japan. It also means openly observing and receiving ideas from anyone around you who can help. Humbly, I hope that perhaps I've offered a few of those ideas today. Moving toward Atsuka-san's remarks, I'll say that Toyota actually provides an example from my life. I live in the southeastern United States. Manufacturing historically employed a lot of people where I live, and suspicion of Japan ran high in the 1980s, a generation ago. Toyota made a very strategic decision to open a large manufacturing plant in Kentucky around that time. And it signaled something very important, that my region is a stakeholder in this company, not just as consumers, but as employees and as communities. No one can know how the future would have unfolded if Toyota had not done that. But from my vantage point, it certainly allowed the company to operate more sustainably in this fast-growing region of the United States. And I know that my home state of North Carolina is excited to welcome the 6 production lines that Toyota battery manufacturing plans to open here by 2025. So I'll conclude by saying thank you again. First to my co-panelists, Atsuka-san, Feldman-san. It's an honor to be here with you. To Future Design Initiative through Science and Finance, our hosts. To Brunswick Group and Kaneda-san, we appreciate you as well. I'm Matt Leatherman, Managing Director, Research Strategist for FCLT Global, and I look forward to your questions and conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. So it's interesting to have a stakeholder for Toyota as a panelist as well. So では大塚さん、よろしくお願いします。じゃあ、まずは自己紹介に続き、トヨタが国際的に事業を展開している日本企業としての直面するサステナビリティ取り組みの課題について話してもらいたいです。お願いします。
ありがとうございます。本当に今日は貴重な機会をいただきまして、またマットさんにはトヨタのアメリカでのケンタッキーとかノースカロライナでの取り組みもご紹介いただいて、すごくなんかウォームウェルカムな感じで嬉しいです。今ご紹介がありましたけれども、トヨタ自動車でチーフサステナビリティオフィサーという仕事をしています。これは20年の2月に新しくできた役職で、それに私は21年の6月からついています。で、チーフサステナビリティオフィサーっていうのは最近すごく増えてきてはいるんですけれども、会社によっていろいろ役割は違いますが、トヨタの場合はですね、ステークホルダーの皆様とのエンゲージメント、今日みたいな機会も含めてですね、こういうことを起点にしながらサステナビリティへの取り組みをもっと加速していくようにリードしていくというのが私の役割です。で、これまで実はサステナビリティの仕事をほとんどしたことがなくてですね、商品の企画ですとか、人事でダイバーシティのプロジェクト、またはガズレーシングカンパニーというですね、モータースポーツとスポーツカーを担当する仕事もしていまして、いろんな全然違う分野の仕事をしてきたわけですけれども、通じてみますと、革新的な商品をどうやって出していくのかですとか、ダイバーシティを社内でどうやって尊重する文化を作っていくのか、また、ガズレーシングっていうところは、モータースポーツやスポーツカーを規定にしながら会社を変革しようということで、常に会社を変革するような仕事についてこれたのかなというふうに思っています。 で、ご質問のトヨタが直面するサステナビリティの取り組み課題ということなんですけれども、先ほどマットさんからもありましたように、非常にサステナビリティというのが注目を集めているわけですが、トヨタとしてはですね、この創業の時から、産業報告、ビジネスを通じて国に報いていくということを考えてやってきましたので、サステナビリティ何も新しいことではないというふうに考えています。ただ、一方でですね、やはり、先行きが見えない、非常に不確実性の高い時代だという話がありましたが、自動車業界そのものが、この数年前から100年に一度の大変革期だというふうに言われていまして、サステナビリティの課題にしっかり貢献していくためにも、また会社自体がですね、サステナブルであるためにも、やはりサステナビリティの取り組みを加速して、会社自体を変革していかないといけないというふうに考えています。で、具体的には私たちは、自動車を作る会社からモビリティカンパニーに変わりますよという言い方をしてまして、ちょうど4月に新しい佐藤社長が就任したんですけれども、彼の最大のミッションはこのモビリティカンパニーへの変革を加速することであるというふうに言っています。じゃあ、モビリティカンパニーっていうのは一体何なのかっていうことなんですけれども、これもサステナビリティに深く結びついてまして、これまでやってきたこのビジネスの領域を超えてですね、より幅広いところで、新しい価値を創造していく、または社会課題に、解決に貢献していくということが、モビリティカンパニーに変わっていく意味かなというふうに思っています。で、大きな課題はやはり、気候変動が自動車としては大きいかなというふうに思ってまして、トヨタというのはですね、実は地域のポートフォリオが非常にバランス型になってまして、多くのメーカーが、一番大きいところ、その次ぐらいで8割ぐらいのマーケット、販売の比率を占めることが多いんですけれども、トヨタは比較的日本、アメリカ、その他の地域、アジアですとか、ヨーロッパ、それぞれ中国も含めてですね、バランス型のポートフォリオになってますので、それぞれ相当多様な地域で多様なお客様のニーズがあって、例えば再生可能エネルギーの導入比率なんかも地域別に全然違う。こういったところでですね、誰一人取り残さずにインクルーシブにカーボンニュートラルを、実現するっていうのは大きなチャレンジだなと思っています。で、そのためにですね、今多様な選択肢が必要だろうということを言ってまして、エネルギーと、それからパワートレーンの組み合わせで、バッテリー EV もいりますし、水素を電気に変えて走る、燃料電子車も必要ですし、また、カーボンニュートラル燃料みたいなことも出てきてますので、やはり内燃機関を使いながら、カーボンニュートラルを実現していく地域もあるだろうというふうに考えています。こういう多様な選択肢が必要だっていうことを理解していただくのも、実は少し前までチャレンジだったんですけれども、最近かなりですね、いろんな方々から、メイクセンスだと、やはり世界っていうのは多様なんだから、多様なソリューションがいるよね、ということを言っていただいています。で、もう一つ私たちのチャレンジは、この多様な選択肢を、自分たちである意味、全部揃えようとしてますので、このマルチパスウェイと言っているアプローチの中で、一つ一つをちゃんとコンペティティブなものに、商品にしていくということが重要でして、そのためにですね、それぞれの技術ごとのシナジーも探っていきますし、新しいパートナーの方と結びついていく。または、もう一つ、このバッテリー EV ですとか、水素みたいなことを、会社そのものを先ほど申し上げました変革のチャレンジを、チャンスだというふうに考えてですね、今までの考えを置いて、新しいやり方にしていくための、オポチュニティだというふうに考えて取り組んでいく。そんなことをやっています。
ちょっと追加でお聞きしたいんですが、トヨタのサステナビリティとグローバルの取り組みはどうなのですか？だから日本中心なのか、またはすでに様々なステークホルダーをね、取り組んでいくのか、どうやってこういうグローバルって本当に大きな企業で、それをどうマネージしているのか、ちょっと聞きたいんです。
ありがとうございます。そうですね。 サステナビリティというのはある意味グローバルな課題で、ESG でもイシューとなることが比較的決まってきているわけですけれども、一方で先ほど気候変動のところで申し上げました通り、実際その課題を解決しようとすると、地域はそれぞれ非常に多様な状況にあって、一つのやり方ではうまくいかないというのが私たちの考えです。ですので、トヨタはですね、実は今、世界一の企業ではなくて、町一番の企業になりましょうということで、地域のニーズにしっかり寄り添って、そこでベストなものを地域の方と一緒に考えながらやっていこうというふうに考えています。で、実はトヨタもですね、グローバルに拡大していくときには、どちらかというと、マーケットが大きい地域、そこで、たくさん売れる車、利益が出る車にフォーカスして、開発を進めたり、ビジネスを進めてきていたわけなんですけれども、リーマンショックがあってですね、一気にマーケットが落ちたときに、赤字に転落しまして、でそこからもう一回トヨタがやるべきビジネスってどういうことなんだろうっていうのをみんなで考えてですね、やはりグローバルナンバーワンではなくて地域の方々のニーズにしっかりお応えするということが重要じゃないかということで、ラインナップの持ち方もグローバル車種だけではなくて地域のニーズにしっかり合ったものを作るですとか、そういうことに変えました。で、聞くとですね、それは傾向率が悪いんじゃないかっていうふうに、思われる方も多いかと思うんですけれども、実際ですね、私たちの損益分岐台数っていうのは、このグローバル期に、グローバルナンバーワンを目指してきた時よりも、今の方が 30% ぐらい低くなってまして、こうやって難しい課題にチャレンジしながら、地域の人のでも希望をしっかり叶えていきたいっていう、情熱を持ってやることによって、企業の競争力が上がってきたなというふうに思ってますので、これからも非常にチャレンジングでありますけれども、地域ごとの課題にしっかり向き合ってやっていくっていうことが、グローバル企業としても重要だなと思ってます。
ありがとうございます。本当ですね。グローバルでありながら、ローカルを見ながらっていう。そうですね。ありがとうございます。So next, I would like to hear from Robert. So Robert, I would like you to first to introduce yourself and then bring your thoughts on Japan's sustainability approach, insights in what global audience can learn from Japan. And because you are experienced gaijin here in Japan, so the best person to talk about it, please.
Thank you very much. And first, let me give a special thanks not only to you, Kanata-san, but also to Onozuka-san, who was my student at Tokyo University of Science when she was in the MOT program there, one of our most talented students. So, Onozuka-san, thank you very much for the invitation today. As a brief self-introduction, since I'm an MIT boy, I'd like to use numbers. 25, 34, 47, and 53. 25 is the number of years I've been working at Morgan Stanley as an economist. 34, the number of years on Wall Street. 47, the number of years as an economist. And 53 is the number of years I've been involved with Japan. I came as a high school boy, and I lived for a year in Nagoya. And the first thing I did to help my host family there was help them with a presentation for Toyota that they were putting together in their little, tiny little business that they ran. So that's by way of introduction. My topic today is Japan's approach to sustainability. And I would basically like to make 2 points. One is the technology focus, and then second, the strengths and weaknesses. On the technology focus, Japan has a long history of extreme focus on technology as a way of solving problems. This is a great thing. It's exactly right. The great economist Schumpeter focused on technology as the real driver of economic growth. That's entirely correct. So in that sense, Japan has it right. Prime Minister Kishida's first policy speech said his growth strategy is based on making Japan a science and technology country. Good, exactly right, okay? That said, there are 4 stages of diffusion of technology. Having the technology is good, but somebody's got to use it. And that's where the hard part comes. So while I was teaching at Tokyo University of Science, I developed a 4-stage approach to this. The first stage is recognizing the problem. Japan is very good at recognizing problems. The analogy I like to make is with the movie Godzilla. Godzilla is attacking, and everybody knows this is a problem. Okay. The second stage is using technology to address the problem. And in that movie, Dr. Serizawa developed the oxygen destroyer, which was supposed to, knock over and kill off Godzilla. Fine. But somebody had to decide to actually use the new technology. In the Meiji period, the Emperor Meiji, his Empress Shokin, they were very, very influential in creating a consensus to adapt and develop new technology. Japan was a very, very high technology country already, but there had to be a consensus to use this technology in a national strategy. And then finally, in day-to-day work, people had to get things done today, not wait till tomorrow, do them now. That's particularly important in sustainability because we don't have a lot of time left. So those are the four stages: recognition, technology, consensus, and action. Japan, as I said, is very good at recognition. It's very good at technology. Consensus building has been a little more difficult, but it's a little better than it was before. Leadership has been difficult, but it's a little better than it was before. In the public sphere, I think the leadership demonstrated by Prime Ministers Koizumi, Prime Minister Abe, Prime Minister Suga, and Prime Minister Kishida in defining and pushing agendas forward is very, very clear. At the corporate level, we're seeing better leadership now too. Toyota is an excellent example of this, but there are many other companies now that have leadership that is more responsive to customer needs, more responsive to social needs, more responsive to investors. So that's a good step forward. That said, we still need to be aware of what I call the CRIC cycle: crisis, response, improvement, complacency. Because when we think we're making progress, we get lazy. And that is really, really bad. So I think the key here is to maintain the sense of crisis about what's going on. It's not hard with all the horrible flooding we've seen, not here, just here in Japan, but elsewhere. But we have to maintain that sense of crisis, and what do we do? In this point, Japan is, I think, reasonably well placed, because Japan has a lot of dense networks of people who talk to each other a lot. Okay? I just was talking to a friend the other day, and he said, "Oh, I met your other friend there." I hadn't known they were connected, but they went to the same business school. Okay? Japan has lots of benkyokai, that is study groups. They have lots of dosokai, sort of old school groups. People get together with their elementary school colleagues all the time. Information flows. And that set of really sociological elements, the dense networks, are the networks through which information passes. That's what we need to use in order to implement this technology focus to sustainability. Strengths and weaknesses. Strengths. First, science policy is very much based on real science. Japan has an excellent base of scientists. It's also based on an educated electorate that accepts the results of science. Unfortunately, in many countries, including my own, the US, populism has kind of eclipsed the confidence and the credibility of science among some parts of the population. That is very detrimental to what's going on. But in Japan, people trust science, they use science, and I think that's a great strength in implementing and spreading the new technologies. Another thing Japan is very good at is keeping the pressure on to do things day to day to day to day to day to day, everyday work, a little bit every single day to improve things. So those are two strengths that will help in developing technology and spreading it. What are the weaknesses? One is that decision-making is too slow. Climate change will not wait for Japan to make decisions. One of the areas that I think is important here is the way policies are made in the government, in the system of commissions, the Shingikai system. There are 130 commissions in the national government. Most of them have 30 people on them. You're not going to get a lot of decisions made very quickly in a 30-member group that only meets a couple times a year, which is appointed by that bureaucracy without consultation with other bureaucracies, and they don't talk to each other. That's one of the reasons that decisions are just too slow. Another reason that leadership such as that provided by President Sato is so important. Another one is that decision-making is compartmentalized. Yes, information flows through informal networks, but the decision-making is very compartmentalized. For example, we never really talk about the relationship of sustainability, climate with Social Security. Well, what's the relationship? Well, the relationship is this. Japan now spends about 140 trillion yen every year on social programs. If we're going to spend more on sustainability, on R&D, on education, on labor retraining, we have to use some of that money from Social Security. So we have to find probably technological solutions to lower costs in medical, in welfare, improve the incentives in the welfare system. So those are the things that we need to do is in creating the basis on which we can create the next sustainability moves. This is not easy. What politician is going to stand in front of the railroad station and say, I'm going to cut your Social Security and use the money for sustainability. Vote for me. That's not so easy. Okay? So I think this compartmentalization of decision-making is an issue for Japan. And then finally, vested interests, because many of these commissions have very strong representation of the producers, not so much of the consumers. And so vested interests tend to be quite strong in a lot of the decisions. This is a problem in energy. It's a problem in agriculture. It's a problem in medical area, et cetera, et cetera. So those weaknesses need to be addressed. And I think Japan is making a lot of progress in them. And Japan is not the only country that suffers from these problems. But those are the things that I think need to be addressed. So to summarize, Japan's approach to sustainability is very much technology focused, but there are some elements in Japanese society that are good examples for other countries to mimic. But there are also some things that we need to do in the social structure to make decisions faster and to spread the technology faster. So let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. So I'll piggyback in your kind of remarks and ask about, like, globally, generally, what is the way forward for sustainability issues? So why is the progress sluggish in a way? I think you mentioned we don't have time, but I think not only Japan, but again, globally, we are kind of on kind of borrowed time, I'll say. So what do you think is key to accelerate the process?
I have a somewhat cynical view of human society. In fact, primate society, Reichuri shakai. We have a tendency to get complacent very quickly. When there's a crisis, we move. We do something. And that usually helps the problem a little bit. And then we get lazy. And because we get lazy, things get worse again. This is what I call the crick cycle: crisis, response, improvement, and complacency. This is inevitable. That's what humans are like. However, we can do one thing, which is to increase our social sensitivity, or the sensitivity of our decision-making, to problems. So when a company sees its earnings going down, if they move quickly to do something about it, that's great. If they have 15 different conferences about what to do, they're going to go bankrupt. Changing our institutions to deal with crisis is one thing. But the other very important thing is to have the plans ready when the crisis hits. Because if you have a plan, then you can do something. It should be a good plan. And as Tim Geithner once said, plan beats no plan. But it is our job every day to say, okay, I see this crisis coming. If it comes, this is the plan to deal with it. So I think this process of using prior planning to deal with potential crises, that I think is the key element in a faster decision-making process.
Thank you. 大塚さんはどう思いますか？だから具体的に課題をね、進める、加速させるためには何ができるか、何が必要なのか。
ありがとうございます。 やっぱり、それぞれの大きな目標を、ブレイクダウンしてアクショナブルな形にして、どんどんスピードを上げて、フェルブンさんおっしゃるように進めていくような、なんていうんですかね、そういう進み方に移行していかないといけないなと思ってまして、ちょうど先週実は国連の会議に出させていただいていたんですけれども、そこでのメインのテーマが、ローカリゼーションオブ SDGs だってまして、やっぱり国レベルの高い目標をローカルレベルまでブレイクダウンして、地域ごとのきちっとしたプライオリティに従って、ターゲットを決めて、そこに向けてどれくらい進んでいるのかをレビューしながらどんどん進めていこうということを、今結構ローカルの政府が始めているんですよね。で、それを聞いて、先ほど申し上げたトヨタも、町一番っていうことでやってきたのと、非常に考えも近いし、それくらいにやはりアンビシャスな目標だとしても、ブレイクダウンして、そして何か行動を起こしてみる。で、起こしてみると、また違う課題が出てきたり、もしくは思いがけぬ突破口だったり、ソリューションを持っている人がパートナーとして現れるみたいなことが、私たちもいろんな車の技術の開発の中でありますので、そういう形で、もう少しブレイクダウンして、アクショナブルなものにして、スピーディーに、まずはやってみる。そういうアプローチを、どんどんいろんな企業ですとか、自治体がやることが大事かなと。
ありがとうございます。So Matt, I'll throw a little bit different question to you. So it's about innovation. Otsuka-san mentioned about kind of localizing the problem and the solutions and like think globally, but thinking like approaching things, the issues locally. So my question is, what can we do to encourage innovation as a key driver to address these sustainability issues like globally and also locally? Because there is such mix of stakeholders, right? So different stakeholders think differently. So how do you apply the innovation and also align interest to make things move forward?
Thank you for this question. I'll speak up here and draw inspiration from what both of my co-panelists have said. I think Toyota's provided great examples, and that Robert's provided a really compelling paradigm with crisis response initiative and then having to worry about complacency. When we look at investment in corporate institutions around the world, we see the ones that are able to rise to that challenge that you just identified as those that establish conviction and are able to act on conviction. They have a strategy and they know what it looks like over time. So very much to Robert's point, you can't just have it and say it and then wait until things go bad. You have to stay alive. You have to continue to adapt. You have to put it into practice. But when you do have that strategy and act with conviction, it does make the challenge of managing stakeholders a little bit more tractable. No institution can please everyone equally and always. There are processes, though, by which a long-term investor or a long-term corporation can understand who its stakeholders are, can anticipate the expectations that key stakeholders are likely to have, can process those expectations and be able to determine which of these are really my responsibility and which of these are not. Sometimes that involves difficult communication, telling a stakeholder this is not something for which we can take responsibility. But then for those expectations where a firm or an investor can take responsibility, it gets very practical at that point. Understanding what this looks like in incentives, in risk management, in human resources, in projections and expectation setting. You have to get down to those levels of what seems like ordinary business in a lot of respects. It's more difficult because it has to do with people rather than numbers, but the process probably feels relatively familiar. And so once a firm or an investor has that strategy, is able to communicate it, knows what it looks like over time, and whether they're fulfilling it, whether they're committed to it, you can then communicate that to stakeholders and use it for determining how to act on those various responsibilities. And that's not easy, but it is easier.
Thank you. Unfortunately, our time is coming to an end. I think we can talk forever about these issues, but we have the conference for that. So stay tuned. We have a lot of panels about this. So I'd like to ask each panelist to provide final thoughts. So starting with you, Matthew, please.
My final thoughts are quite simple. I'm grateful again for the chance to be part of this important discussion. I hope that we've laid out some practices in the catalytic or analytic approach to sustainability and some of those themes that folks in the room can use. I make myself available to anyone who would like to continue the conversation. You can go to fcltglobal.org and find my contact information in our research. And if any of this is relevant to your work, we are, again, a nonprofit research organization. Our job is to make sure that transitions like the one this panel has described happen. And we're ready to have a conversation with anyone who may be interested. So thank you again. It's an honor to be with each of you today.
大塚さん、コメントお願いします。
本当にありがとうございました。今話してきたようにサステナビリティってすごくチャレンジが大きいわけですし、もちろん時間がないっていうことだと思うんですけれども、でもこういう中でこそ私たちは今までのウィークネスだと思ってたことをどうやって克服するのかみたいなことにフォーカスできますし、やはり会社そのものがサステナブルに変わっていくためのトランスフォーメーションのチャンスだというふうに思いますので、それを活かしながら新しいステークホルダーに出会う、ステークホルダーとの関係を変える、ステークホルダーとのコミュニケーションの仕方変える、いろんなことでイノベーションを起こしてサステナビリティに向かってみんなで向かっていきたいなと思います。ありがとうございました。
ありがとうございます。Robert?
Thanks very much. Following on what Otsuka-san has just said, I think that the key to sustainability is really recognizing the connection between connectivity, everybody talking to each other, and diversity. You have to talk to different kinds of people. I had a student at TUS who once said he worked for a firm in the Shimbashi area, and from the station to the office took 10 minutes, but in the evening, from the office to the station took 3 hours because they would all stop and drink, okay? So why aren't we seeing more idea, creation? And the point is, they were all talking to the same guys all the time. You got to talk with different people. And if we can have dense connectivity between a diverse set of people, then the number of ideas will increase, the diffusion will increase, and we'll have a better shot at sustainability.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, panelists. So a very, very insightful discussion. So thank you, everyone, for participating and joining the conference.
Thank you.
ありがとうございます。